Hey everyone. Today we're going to follow the life of one of the most powerful, poetic, and strategic rulers in history, Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, the man who turned the Ottoman Empire into a superpower that spanned continents, languages, and faiths. This is a story of silk and steel, palaces and prisons, battlefield glory, and heartbreaking betrayal. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. And while you're at it, drop a comment telling me where in the world you're listening from and what time it is over there. Now, let's listen to my compelling story in this video. You are not wearing a crown. Not yet. Right now, you're a boy wandering the gardens of Trabzon, a foggy coastal town on the Black Sea, where lilacs hang thick and salty air curls in from the water. Your name is Suleiman, and your father is Selim This, a warrior feared as Selim the Grim, a man who took Egypt, crushed the Mamluks, and seized the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. But that's not your story yet. Your world, for now, is books. You trace Arabic script with your fingers. You recite Persian poetry with the grace of a mystic, and you sketch calligraphy by candlelight. You're not dreaming of conquests. You're dreaming of poems. But fate doesn't ask for permission. By the time you're a teenager, you're sent far from home, not to study, but to govern. Ottoman princes are trained like gladiators in silk robes, not coddled. You're given a district, a small court, a watchful eye from the palace. You're told, rule this, or you will never rule at all. Still, you manage to sneak books under your robes. You quote Rumi when you walk through the marketplace. You study Alexander the Great and wonder, what would make someone follow a king to the edge of the world? Then one day, word arrives in the form of a shadow. You're just 26. Your father is dead. Selim died suddenly, probably from a skin infection or maybe something more sinister. You don't cry. You walk out of your chambers, mount a horse, and head straight for Constantinople. You are now Sultan Suleiman Khan, 10th ruler of the House of Osman, Padishah of the East and West, Caliph of Islam, protector of the holy cities, king of kings. But Europe doesn't see you that way. When envoys whisper your name across Venetian taverns and Austrian drawing rooms, they call you the weak one, the poetic prince, the soft one, the scholarly boy with the thin beard and love letters in his sleeves. They think you'll be easier than Selim, a breeze after a hurricane. You are not a breeze. You are the calm before a storm. When you arrive in Constantinople, the city of domes and thrones, you make no fiery speeches. You walk the palace in silence, every step echoing off marble. But behind closed doors, you begin to sharpen the empire. You examine tax codes, you clear out corrupt judges, you reorganize military units with eerie precision. You read law books until sunrise and then ride out to the barracks to inspect cannons by midday. You don't sleep much. People start whispering something new. This boy is serious. This boy is hungry. Your first act? You raise Pargali Ibrahim, your childhood best friend, a Greek slave boy turned genius tactician to your side. Others raise eyebrows, but you know loyalty is the most expensive thing in an empire, and Ibrahim is worth every ounce of gold. The empire stretches from Budapest to Baghdad, Cairo to Crimea, and you know it's not enough. You look north. Hungary. Christian Europe is divided, arguing over reformations and popes. The Habsburgs and French are feuding, the Venetians are scheming, and no one expects an Ottoman thunderclap. That's your advantage. And when the ink dries on your first orders, the empire begins to move. Armies are summoned, bridges reinforced, horses shod, cannons oiled, messengers gallop across deserts, ships leave the Golden Horn like arrows from a bow. But still, some in your court worry. They whisper behind velvet curtains. You're too young, too bookish, not your father's son. So you send a message, not with words, but with fire and steel. You will bring Europe to its knees, not through rage, but through calculation. You close your copy of Ferdowsi's Shahnameh, rise from your golden divan, and walk into your war tent. Your empire is awake. And for the first time in centuries, Europe is about to be outwitted not just by armies, but by a man who thinks like a poet and strikes like a general. Waiting for. You're standing on a marble balcony overlooking the Bosphorus, dawn light catching the curve of your turban. Your father's empire sprawls before you like a living map. But it's not enough just to inherit it. You have to prove you deserve it. And you know exactly how. Europe is watching. Hungary thinks you're green. The Habsburgs think you're a passing shadow. Venice is politely pretending to be scared while sharpening its knives behind its back. You smile, because you already know where to strike first. Your advisors urge caution, reminding you that consolidating power at home should come before dreaming of conquest. But you don't hesitate. The time to test Suleiman the Magnificent has arrived, and you plan to answer it with thunder. Your target? Belgrade, a jewel fortress on the Danube, the gateway to Europe. It guards Hungary like a steel door, one your father never managed to kick down. And that unfinished business burns in your chest like fire. In Constantinople, you commission a grand campaign. And not just a military one. You send orders to blacksmiths in Anatolia, scribes in Cairo, camel trains in Damascus, and boat builders along the Aegean. Your war machine is humming. You ride with your men as they cross the Balkan hills, rivers roaring below, banners flapping red and gold. You eat what your soldiers eat. You inspect the cannons yourself. The soldiers call you Suleiman the Just because you don't scream, you listen, and then you act. By the time you reach the gates of Belgrade in 1521, you have 100,000 soldiers and a fleet of artillery that makes the walls tremble before a shot is fired. But the defenders, Hungarian knights, are proud, elite, and utterly convinced that no Muslim army can breach Belgrade. After all, they say it held off your father. You make no speeches. You just give the signal. The siege begins. Cannonballs slam into the stone like hammers. Dust explodes in the air. Day after day, you hammer the walls. Your janissaries dig tunnels beneath the earth, lighting fuses and collapsing bastions. You keep the men supplied, moving, confident. But the Hungarians fight back fiercely. Their arrows are deadly. Their cavalry sally out at night. Their fortress is layered, walls within walls. And then the rains come. Your advisors suggest retreat. The men are tired. The terrain is muddy. The Danube swells like a monster, cutting your lines. You don't retreat. You build. You order floating bridges. You redirect rivers. You bring in fresh supplies and boost morale by personally walking the line. Every day, every trench, every cannon position. And when a final tunnel collapses the inner walls of Belgrade, your janissaries surge in. The city falls. You don't massacre. You send priests back to Hungary alive. You walk through the ruined fort in silence, pick up a handful of broken stone, and whisper something your father once said. The world is a wheel. Back in Constantinople, the people erupt in joy. Mosques ring with praise. You're no longer the scholarly boy. You're now Suleiman the Conqueror, a name not uttered since Mehmed took Constantinople. But you're not finished, not even close. While the dust still hangs over Belgrade, you gather your council. Maps of Europe stretch across the divan. Hungary is now terrified. The Habsburgs begin to pray louder. Venice starts writing very polite letters. And yet you don't press forward immediately. Instead, you secure the Balkans. You replace corrupt governors. You repair roads. You issue coinage stamped with your name. You act like a Roman emperor would have, building not just conquest, but continuity. Meanwhile, the Western courts begin to panic. Papal envoys write letters draped in dread. Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, is forced to divide his troops between German rebellions and this rising Islamic juggernaut in the east. You've done more than conquer a city. You've shifted the entire political balance of Europe. France, desperate to resist the Habsburgs, begins floating the idea of alliances with the Ottomans. Christian kings whisper of letters to a Muslim emperor, you! The unthinkable is now possible, all from one move. And in your heart, you understand why it matters. Because you're not just a warrior, you're a chess player. You're already thinking 3 moves ahead. Europe wanted to test you, so you've answered with Belgrade, and with it, you've torn a hole in the myth of Christian invincibility. Now the world knows your name, not just as a son of Selim, not just as a poet with soft hands, but as Suleiman the Magnificent, the Sultan who brought fire to the gates of Europe and didn't blink. You march, not with the elegant ease of a parade, but with the slow, crushing rhythm of empire. Iron-shod boots chewing through Balkan soil, carts creaking under the weight of bronze cannons, and banners high like a forest of fire. You don't walk alone. Behind you stretch hundreds of thousands, janissaries, Sipahi cavalry, sappers, medics, cooks, and engineers. Your target lies to the south this time. Rhodes, the island fortress of the Knights of St. John, the last crusading order in the eastern Mediterranean, and the last Christian stronghold between Anatolia and Egypt. The knights are elite, hardened, and proud. They've held out for 2 centuries, even when Mehmed II tried and failed to take them. You're not planning to fail. The year is 1522. You arrive by sea, your fleet rolling in like a tide summoned by will. 60,000 soldiers disembark under the scorching Aegean sun. Cannons roll across rocky shores. Tents rise like a new city just outside the fortress walls. The Grand Master of the Knights, Philippe de Villiers de l'Isle-Adam, is no coward. He tightens defenses, sends urgent pleas to Europe, calls to arms, cries for help. He gets silence in return. Europe is too busy feuding with itself to send a single soldier. So Rhodes will stand alone. The siege begins. You don't go in blind. You send sappers beneath the walls, tunneling, probing. You map every angle, every fault line. You place your heaviest cannons on raised platforms, pounding the fortress like a drum. Weeks go by. The knights resist with fury. They pour boiling oil, fire arquebuses from murder holes, counter your tunnels with their own. You lose men, brave men, but you press on. Every time your janissaries fall, more climb the ladders. Every breach repaired by day is bombarded again by night. Then, something changes. You dig a tunnel deep under the bastion of Spain, a corner of the fortress bristling with defenders. You place tons of black powder beneath it, set the fuse, and step back. The explosion rips through stone and bone. The wall craters inward. You order the charge. Janissaries flood in like wolves. The knights rally, but they're bleeding. Their walls are down. Their food is gone. Their reinforcements? A dream. The people of Rhodes, terrified and starving, begin to beg the Grand Master to surrender. And now, the moment that defines you, not just as a conqueror, but as a statesman. You don't demand slaughter. You offer peace. In full ceremonial robes, you send word into the fortress, surrender, and no Rhodian civilian will be harmed. The knights can leave with honor. The churches will remain open. No one will be enslaved. And here's the twist. You keep your word. The Grand Master surrenders. The knights are allowed to leave, escorted by your ships. The city of Rhodes bends its knee, but does not burn. Europe watches in stunned silence. They expected a bloodbath. You gave them mercy. Not because you are weak, but because you are strong enough not to need cruelty. Rhodes now becomes an Ottoman island. Its strategic position secures your control of eastern trade routes. Your navy has a new base. The Mediterranean tilts further in your favor. Back in Constantinople, your court explodes with celebration. Mosques ring with bells and drums, crowds chant your name, poems flow like water through the streets. But deep in your private chambers, you sit in silence. You write poems. You write about war, about love, about destiny. You compare the human soul to a fortress, scarred, layered, but ultimately beautiful when it surrenders to truth. You're not just ruling with the sword, you're ruling with image, with policy, law, and art. And you're sending a message to Europe, to the East, to history, that you are not your father. You are something else entirely. You are Suleiman the Poet-King, and you've just silenced the Mediterranean's last crusader stronghold without becoming a monster. But across the Adriatic, Charles V of the Holy Roman Empire is reading the same reports you are. And he's not celebrating, he's preparing. Because Suleiman hasn't just taken islands and fortresses, he's opened a door that leads to Vienna. And the heart of Europe is next. You ride west now, past the sunlit ruins of Rhodes, past the green sweep of Bulgaria and the Danube's winding spine. The air turns sharp, the hills roll higher. You're heading into the heart of Europe, and every hoofbeat is an echo of something ancient. Caesar's legions, Alexander's phalanxes, Attila's hordes, but you're none of them. You are Suleiman, the sovereign of half the world, the lawgiver, the sword of Islam, and the man who's about to knock on Vienna's gates. The year is 1526, and Hungary stands in your way, not just geographically, but spiritually. It's the last true buffer between your empire and the glittering riches of Western Europe, and it's breaking. King Louis II, young and untested, leads a hollow army. His nobles squabble, his coffers are dry, and he doesn't know you've spent months preparing. Your troops trained to fight in rain and mud, your artillery hauled across miles of mountain track. You're not sending in raiders. You're bringing the full force of an empire. At Mohacs, Hungary's army lines up in glittering pride. 10,000 knights in shining armor, banners snapping in the wind. It looks impressive, until the first Ottoman cannon speaks. The ground jumps. Knights fly like toys. Your janissaries fan out with cold precision, muskets flashing, pikes thrusting. And then a downpour, a biblical storm hits the plain. Perfect for you. The Hungarian cavalry charges straight into swampy terrain. They bog down. They're sitting ducks. Your forces encircle, slice, and shatter. By sundown, King Louis is dead, thrown from his horse into a marsh, drowned beneath the weight of his own armor. Hungary is yours, but you don't annex it outright. Not yet. You leave a puppet king in place, John Zapolya, your vassal, and watch as Charles Pfaff and his brother Ferdinand start clawing at the corpse of Hungary like wolves. That's exactly what you want, because division makes the next step easier. Now, the Habsburg brothers are distracted. Hungary is split, bleeding, and Vienna is vulnerable. You ride again in 1529. This time, your army is even larger, perhaps 125,000 strong. Camels trudge with supplies, artillery rolls with thunder, and janissaries sing as they march through hostile forests. It's not just a military campaign, it's psychological warfare. You want Europe to see you coming, to feel it in their bones. But fate has a sense of drama. By the time you reach Vienna's outskirts, autumn storms hit with brutal timing. Roads vanish under mud, horses die, cannons sink. The siege begins in miserable cold. And your engineers can't dig trenches through the soaked clay fast enough. Vienna, though weakened, is not foolish. Its defenses are tight, walls are reinforced, cannons are ready, and its people, terrified as they are, fight like cornered animals. Still, your men press forward. Tunnels are dug, explosives planted, one breach opens, and janissaries flood in, only to be pushed back by boiling oil, rolling logs, and sheer desperation. The fighting is savage. But something else is worse. Disease, rain breeds sickness, supply lines stretch thin, horses collapse. Even your elite troops begin to cough and stumble. You stand in your tent, maps soaked, fingers cold, watching the fog settle on Vienna like a crown. You could stay. You could bleed your army dry to win this frozen jewel. But you don't, because you're not a gambler. You're a strategist. You call the retreat. And just like that, Europe exhales. Vienna still stands. But something has changed. You didn't take the city, but you brought terror to its gates. You forced kings to rethink their alliances. You made the Pope pray harder. And you etched your name into Western memory as the ruler who dared what others only dreamed. You ride back, not in defeat, but in calculated withdrawal. Your army lives, your empire is intact, and your message is clear. This is not over. Back in Constantinople, you receive ambassadors with calm eyes and folded hands. You expand your bureaucracy, you mint new coins, you compose more poetry, and you plan. Because Vienna is still there, still waiting, still in reach. You've taught Europe one lesson already, that Suleiman doesn't bluff. And next time, the ground will tremble harder. You're back in your palace now, in Constantinople, safe behind walls that gleam under the Anatolian sun, gardens humming with birdsong and jasmine. But you don't rest. You observe. Because while armies can take cities, it is intellect that holds them. You look around your court, and you realize something that would terrify most rulers. You are surrounded by men who are afraid of you, and by women who see you only as a prize to be won. Then she arrives. Roxolana. No one saw her coming. She's not a noblewoman. She wasn't born in palaces or trained in etiquette. She came to you as a gift, a concubine from Ruthenia, possibly kidnapped during a Tatar raid and sold into slavery. Her skin is pale, her hair red gold, her wit sharper than any dagger, and she doesn't bow like the others. She meets your eyes. That alone makes her dangerous. You try to ignore her at first. You've known hundreds of harem women, beautiful, trained, elegant, but none like this. She tells stories that disarm you. She laughs at things you haven't spoken. When she recites Persian poetry, it's not with the flowery cadence of court entertainers, it's with the bite of someone who knows what sorrow feels like. And you, Sultan of the world, fall for her. Her real name is Anastasia, or maybe Alexandra Lisowska. No one can be sure. But the name she takes in your court is Hurrem, meaning the joyful one. Soon, she is more than that. She becomes your wife. And that, in Ottoman law, is revolutionary. No sultan for centuries has married a concubine. They have sons, yes, but never wives. That keeps them free of political entanglements. But you change the rules. You elevate her to legal consort, shower her with gifts, build her a palace of her own. Your court gasps, your viziers argue, But you don't care because you trust her. She's not just your lover, she's your advisor, your diplomatic partner, your mirror. Together, you shape policies. She intervenes in diplomatic matters. She negotiates with foreign ambassadors, sometimes directly. She writes you letters filled with tenderness and statecraft. When you ride off to war, she rules in your name. And in the harem, she begins a quiet revolution. She rewrites the order of things, making it a place not just of beauty and pleasure, but of power. Women begin to study, to network, to advise, to maneuver. You're not creating a court, you're building a dynasty. Roxolana gives you sons. One of them will someday be sultan. But it's not a simple path. The Ottoman law of succession is brutal. Sons compete, and only one survives. The rest, usually executed to prevent civil war. Roxolana knows this. She begins to protect her children, subtly, relentlessly. She aligns with loyal viziers, cultivates allies in the army, and keeps a watchful eye on your other concubines, especially Mahidevran, your earlier consort, whose son Mustafa is firstborn and beloved by your troops. The palace becomes a chessboard. Every look, every gift, every whisper in the corridor could shift the balance of an empire. And you, Poet-King, conqueror of cities, are walking the tightrope between love and stability. You host court ceremonies with Roxolana at your side. You write poems about her beauty, her loyalty, her mind. You invite artists to immortalize her face in miniatures. She founds mosques, baths, soup kitchens, and schools, charities in her name that stretch across the empire. To the people, she is becoming a queen. To the world, she is the Ottoman Empire's secret engine, the foreign-born girl who now shapes half the planet from behind embroidered screens. But there's danger too. Whispers begin in Europe. Has the Sultan fallen under a sorceress's spell? They call her La Rasa, the red-haired one. Rumors spread that she manipulates you, that she poisons rivals, that she rules through magic. They don't understand that what you've created together is not witchcraft, it's modernity. The harem, once a gilded cage, is now a political headquarters. And Roxolana is no one's prisoner. She is a partner in empire. And yet, beneath the silk and incense, tension grows. Your sons are growing. Your court factions are watching. Your best friend, Ibrahim Pasha, is uneasy. Mahidevran's camp is sharpening blades, figuratively and maybe literally, because no matter how golden the throne, it sits atop a volcano, and you can feel it rumbling. Still, in these rare quiet years with Roxolana, you write your most tender verses. You drink rosewater. You listen to music drifting in from the gardens. You laugh in private. You even build her a mausoleum near yours, side by side forever, when the time comes. Because no matter what else the world may say, you know this. Roxolana is not just the queen of your harem. She is the queen of your heart. And through her, you are learning that conquest is not just about territory. It's about legacy. You sit cross-legged in your divan room, calligraphy brush in hand, eyes scanning the parchment. Outside, Constantinople hums, markets buzzing with saffron and silk, mosque minarets cutting the sky, scholars debating under shade trees. You conquered lands, yes, but now you're doing something even more difficult. You're building a system that can outlast you. They call you Kanuni, the lawgiver, not just for your wars or your poetry, but for the order you create from the chaos of empire. You're reshaping a world of 100 languages, dozens of faiths, and hundreds of ethnic groups into a coherent machine. You begin with a problem your predecessors never solved: how to balance Sharia, the sacred law of Islam, with the messy needs of a real breathing state full of tax collectors, bandits, farmland disputes, and merchant ships. So you write your own code, the Kanun, a secular legal framework designed to complement, not replace, religious law. You call in the empire's finest jurists. You pore over case law and village reports. You study precedent like a detective. The result? A unified, codified, flexible legal system that stretches from Algeria to Azerbaijan. Your laws protect property rights, regulate trade, set tax rates by region, formalize land grants, and even outline the responsibilities of imperial officials. You cap tax farming to avoid abuse. You clarify military obligations so your soldiers know exactly what is expected in return for their fiefs. And, this is key, you publish them in simple Turkish, so even a village elder in the Balkans or a merchant in Damascus can understand. That's not just justice. That's strategy. Because now, every farmer and artisan and caravan leader sees you not just as a distant emperor, but as a protector. A sultan who doesn't just rule from palaces, but from principles. Your Qanun covers more than law. You overhaul the education system. You fund madrasas, schools that blend religious learning with science, law, math, and art. You patronize scholars and ensure that poor children can rise if their minds are sharp enough to become viziers or judges. You reshape the tax code, eliminating arbitrary fees that hurt peasants and small traders. You standardize the coinage, strengthen currency, and back it with the empire's gold and silver mines. And here's where you get clever. You don't crush local customs. You incorporate them. In Christian regions, you allow communities to keep their own courts for internal matters. In Jewish quarters, you appoint community leaders to liaise with the state. You maintain an imperial register of religions and ethnic groups, not to divide, but to manage with precision. You've turned diversity into a tool of administration. Your bureaucracy is a thing of beauty, efficient, layered, multilingual. The Imperial Council meets daily. You personally review cases of injustice. When a widow from the provinces appeals directly to you, you send investigators. No noble is too powerful to escape your reach. Even your army follows the logic of order. The janissaries, your elite infantry, are paid salaries from the treasury, not allowed to own land, so they serve the empire, not their pockets. You use the Dev Sherm system to recruit boys from Christian villages, raising them as loyal soldiers, scholars, or administrators. Some criticize it, but for those boys, it's often the only road to power and education. Many become grand viziers or generals. And then there's your navy. Under your rule, the Ottoman navy becomes the largest and most feared in the Mediterranean. You appoint men like Hayreddin Barbarossa, a former corsair turned admiral, to command it. You build shipyards, train crews, arm galleys with cannons. And suddenly, your empire doesn't just border oceans, it commands them. Your reforms reach the heart of Europe without a single cannonball. Hungarian nobles write you letters requesting protection. French kings open secret channels of diplomacy. Your scribes draft treaties with Venice and Ragusa. Diplomacy becomes another battlefield, and you're winning there too. And through all this, you continue to write. Your poems are copied across the empire, sung in coffee houses, read in mosques. You write under the name Muhibi, the lover. Lines of love, of longing, of divine devotion, of sorrow. Your favorite theme is the fleetingness of power. Empires rise, you write, and roses bloom, both gone by the next dawn. But yours is still rising. You've built a state that out-organizes its rivals, out-governs them, and outlasts their kings. And here's the twist. You haven't stopped conquering. You've simply discovered that real conquest, lasting conquest, isn't one with swords. It's one with systems, laws, and language. You don't just conquer the land. You conquer the future. The map in your council chamber is starting to bulge. From Morocco to Mesopotamia, from the gates of Vienna to the banks of the Nile, the Ottoman crescent arcs across 2 continents. But for you, it's not about painting borders red. It's about out-influence, about silk caravans flowing uninterrupted, about galleons flying your flag in distant waters, about the whole known world knowing exactly who holds the center of gravity. You sit beneath an arched dome in Topkapi Palace, running your fingers over the globe carved in jade and gold. There's one clear truth. Suleiman is everywhere. And nowhere is that more visible than in the spread of your foreign policy, that subtle but ferocious dance of alliances, protectorates, satellite rulers, and the threat of sudden war. Let's take North Africa. You don't directly rule the entire coast, but you don't need to. In Algiers, Tunis, Tripoli, and Fez, you support local beys and corsair lords like Barbarossa, men who terrorize Spanish fleets while swearing fealty to you. They call themselves your servants, but they act as your outstretched arms. You provide cannons and legitimacy. They give you control of the Western Sea. Your empire isn't just growing outward, it's growing deeper. You fortify Egypt, reorganize it after the collapse of the Mamluks, and redirect its tax revenues back into your central treasury. You rebuild Cairo as a cultural jewel while securing the Red Sea from Portuguese incursions. Because yes, the Portuguese are creeping around Arabia. They're trying to choke off the spice routes. So you send your fleets to the Indian Ocean, not in conquest, but as a signal. Ottoman ships clash with Portuguese galleons near Diu. The Red Sea becomes your private corridor. You fortify Aden, take Yemen, and gain control over the key ports that feed global trade. The result? The Silk Road bends toward you. Caravans reroute. Venetian merchants now depend on your safe conduct letters. European kings ask you for trade privileges. The East Indies whisper your name, and you've never even stepped foot there. But let's not forget the Balkans, your empire's mountainous backbone. Here, you're not just ruling through governors, you're building mosques in Buda, public baths in Skopje, caravanserais in Sarajevo. You protect Christian monasteries while taxing their lands with careful equity. You don't erase cultures, you entangle them. A Romanian boy could grow up under your empire, speak Turkish, attend Islamic school, and then rise to the post of provincial governor, all while attending Mass on Sundays. That's your true genius. You don't crush difference, you administer it. Everywhere your empire touches, the system expands. Registers, land surveys, tax audits, military reviews, population counts. A village in Kurdistan receives the same grain measurement protocols as one in Bosnia. This isn't just growth, it's coordination on an imperial scale. But growth brings friction. To the east, the Safavid Empire in Persia is rising, a Shia theocracy challenging your Sunni legitimacy. Their Shah, Tahmasp, sends agents into your territory. He whispers sedition to your Kurdish tribes. He threatens the Holy Lands. And you've had enough. You send an army, not a raid, but a monsoon of steel. Over 200,000 men thunder toward Tabriz, burning through the Zagros Mountains. It's not conquest you're after. It's a message. This land belongs to the House of Osman. Your sword is long, and your memory is longer. But you're not reckless. You advance, fortify, withdraw, stabilizing frontiers while avoiding the bottomless drain of a Persian quagmire. And while soldiers march, so do scholars. You establish Ottoman embassies across Europe, Venice, Paris, even London. You welcome foreign ambassadors with proper ceremony, but you make sure they understand this isn't a court of vanity. This is a machine of order. And you reward those who adapt. The French king, Francis Thurs, breaks with Rome and Spain and dares to ally with you. A Christian king shaking hands with a Muslim sultan. He sends you lavish gifts. You respond with silk robes, gold-threaded tents, and a mutual enemy, the Habsburgs. To Europe, it's shocking. To you, it's just another smart move on the chessboard. You don't care about the dogma of kings. You care about their position, what they control, what they want, and whether they fear you more than each other. And right now, they do. Your empire may not claim all of Europe, but your shadow stretches across its courts. Its kings whisper your name in council. Its popes issue sermons against you. Its merchants rely on your trade routes. Even your enemies mimic your bureaucracy. Because you're not just expanding an empire, you're shaping a global system, one that does not need your armies at every border. Because your influence is already inside the bloodstream of the world. Now you turn east. You've mastered diplomacy in Europe, built a navy that rules the Mediterranean. But in the distance, beyond the deserts and mountains, there's a rising threat with sharper teeth and a different kind of fire. The Safavid Empire under Shah Tahmasp is gaining momentum. He's no fool. He leads a Shia state, militant, organized, and openly hostile to your claim as caliph. And he's not content to glare from the Iranian plateau. He's sending whispers into your borders, stoking unrest among Kurdish tribes, Arab sheikhs, and Turkmen beys. A slow burn, a creeping infection. You've dealt with Christian kings and corsairs, but this is a spiritual threat wrapped in banners of heresy and insurgency. The Safavids say you're a false protector of the faith, so you ride out to correct them. In 1534, you launch your Eastern campaign. Not a skirmish, not a raid, but a full military operation designed to crush resistance and claim legitimacy. The route is brutal. The Zagros Mountains rise like jagged teeth. Rivers cut deep into rocky canyons. Your soldiers freeze at night, swelter by day. But they follow you, because you are Suleiman, and your presence turns exhaustion into resolve. You cross into Azerbaijan. The Shah is nowhere to be found. He refuses open battle, pulling his troops back like smoke into valleys. But you press on. Your prize? Baghdad, a holy city, a strategic key, the ancient seat of the Abbasid caliphs and the heart of old Islamic scholarship. a place that once ruled the world, now caught between empires. You march through the gates in 1534. The city falls with barely a fight, but you don't pillage. You restore. You repair mosques. You protect scholars. You reestablish Sunni governance in a city that had leaned Shia under Persian influence. You stand in the Friday prayer pulpit as Caliph, the protector of Mecca, Medina, and now Baghdad. It's not just military, it's symbolic. You're not conquering the Shia heartlands yet. You're tightening the noose. You're sending a message to the Islamic world. The Ottomans rule the center. But the Safavids don't back down. They continue raiding. Shah Tahmasp refuses to give you the satisfaction of a field battle. He draws you deeper and deeper into Persia, scorching the land behind him. Crops burned, wells poisoned. So you adapt. You build forts. You rotate garrisons. You keep the routes open but avoid the trap of overextending. Then, in 1548, you strike again. Another massive campaign, pushing into Tabriz, the former Safavid capital. Again, it's nearly deserted when you arrive. Again, the Shah flees. It's frustrating, but you're not just measuring victory by conquest. You're asserting Ottoman supremacy in the East. You force the Safavids to play your game. They can't stop you. They can only avoid you. This stalemate becomes the new balance of power. You redraw the map, not with permanent borders, but with dominance. The Safavids know they cannot break you, and the Muslim world sees it too. They begin to accept your leadership not just as king, but as caliph. While swords clash on mountaintops, you're shaping an empire from behind the curtain. You send Sunni scholars into Iraq to re-educate populations swayed by Shia clerics. You rebuild canals and trade hubs. You promote local rulers loyal to Istanbul. You flood the bazaars with Ottoman coinage, and everywhere you go, you bring the law. Kanun scrolls arrive before your soldiers even leave. Tax codes are rewritten to accommodate local customs. Judges trained in your system replace tribal magistrates. You don't just conquer territory, you normalize it. Even in far-off Basra, your banners now fly. That means something, because Basra gives you access to the Persian Gulf, and that means the Indian Ocean is no longer a playground for the Portuguese. You dispatch fleets south. Your admirals begin mapping Arabian ports. You don't just aim at Persia, you aim at trade supremacy. Spices, textiles, porcelain, all of it starts flowing through Ottoman-approved routes. In Istanbul, you read reports from Yemen, Gujarat, Ethiopia. You smile. You're not just expanding an empire, you're closing a circle, linking Europe, the Middle East, and Asia in a single commercial and religious system with one name at its center, Suleiman. But the Safavid fires never truly go out. You launch one final major campaign against them in 1553. You personally lead it, even though age is tightening your joints and the air feels thinner than it used to. You don't stop. You reach the borders again. The Shah again retreats. So this time, you turn your vengeance inward. One of your sons, Mustafa, has been whispering with Persian agents. He's popular with the army. Too popular. You summon him to your camp. What happens next will mark you forever. But that's a story for another moment. Right now, you stand with your empire at full stretch, one hand in the Aegean, the other in the Gulf. The Safavids may still exist, but they've been reduced to shadows. And you, the boy they once mocked as too gentle, too poetic, too scholarly, you've outplayed an entire continent. You sit alone in your tent. The canvas flaps in the wind, and the sounds outside, the clink of armor, the whispers of soldiers, the neighing of restless horses, feel far away. You're at the height of your power, the head of an empire stretching from the Adriatic to the Indian Ocean. But tonight, none of that matters. Tonight, you must do the unthinkable. Your son Mustafa is outside. He's proud, tall, and beloved by the army. The Janissaries chant his name behind your back. The court speaks of him with glowing praise. He is the son of Mahidevran, your earlier consort. And from the moment of his birth, everyone assumed he would one day wear the Sultan's crown. But you no longer trust him. And that's poison in an empire like yours. It began with whispers, letters discovered, intercepted messages from Persian agents, strange movements of troops in Anatolia. Your advisors urged caution, then alarm. Then Roxolana's camp brought evidence. Your Grand Vizier, Rustem Pasha, her son-in-law, made the final case. Mustafa is preparing to seize power. You want to doubt it, but you can't afford to. The Ottoman system is ruthless by design. It does not allow for multiple heirs. The moment one son gains enough military backing, civil war is almost inevitable, and that would tear everything you've built, your laws, your roads, your reforms, into dust. So you summon him. He comes willingly, dressed in full military regalia, tall, noble, defiant. He bows, but not all the way. He speaks, but not with softness. His eyes say everything. Father, I know why I'm here. You nod. The guards step forward. He doesn't fight, not physically, but his eyes burn until the end. They strangle him in the tent. No blood, no blade, no ceremony, just rope and silence as Ottoman tradition dictates. And just like that, Mustafa is gone. The army is stunned. They had loved him. He fought with them in Persia, feasted with them in camps, knew their names. They begin to murmur. You see it in their stares, suspicion, grief, maybe even blame. And for the first time in decades, you feel their distance. The public explanation is treason. The records will show he plotted against the throne. But history? History will argue forever. Did Mustafa betray you? Or did you destroy your best chance at an heir out of fear and palace politics? Roxolana stays silent, but in her silence, you see the lines of a victory. Her son, Selim, now has a clear path to the throne. And Rustam, he is more powerful than ever. You wonder if they saw this coming, if they steered you here. But you say nothing. You're the Sultan. You cannot mourn. Not openly. Instead, you write. Your poems become darker, more introspective. You write of suns and shadows, of swords turned inward, of roses blooming beside graves. And you begin to wonder, what good is an empire if the price is your own blood? But even grief has no time in your world, because Europe is stirring again. The Habsburgs regroup, Spain and Austria coordinate, Venice arms its fleets, and in the Mediterranean, a Christian alliance forms, a naval superpower backed by papal blessing, galleys from Genoa, Naples, and the Knights of Malta. You meet them head-on at the Battle of Preveza in 1538, long before Mustafa's death. But the lesson still rings. Ottoman sea power is unmatched. Your admiral, Hayreddin Barbarossa, commands a fleet that carves through the Christian alliance like a thunderstorm. His galleys are faster, his formations tighter, his sailors hardened from years of piracy and state warfare. The Christian fleet retreats in disorder. The Mediterranean? Now an Ottoman lake. You expand your naval bases in Tunisia, Algiers, and the Aegean. You build ships in Galata faster than your enemies can replace theirs. Ottoman charts and maps become more sophisticated. Your sailors navigate not just the Adriatic and Ionian, but the Red Sea and beyond. Yet still, you feel a shift. You have victories, yes, but they come at higher cost. The court is full of knives behind smiles. Your body aches more often. You no longer ride at the head of every campaign. You trust others now, viziers, sons, governors. And some of them, you fear, play their own games. You build mosques to ease the burden on your soul. In Istanbul, you begin the greatest architectural project of your reign, the Süleymaniye Mosque. Designed by your court architect, Mimar Sinan, it rises like a crown over the city. It is not just a place of prayer, it is a manifesto of order. Domes that balance heaven and earth, geometry that echoes your legal code, silence that speaks to your inner struggle. And beside it, you plan your own tomb. Because even now, with maps thicker than ever, with the world speaking your name with reverence or fear, you know how the story ends. Not with fire, but with legacy. Still, one piece remains. Malta. That stubborn rock ruled by the Knights of St. John you once expelled from Rhodes. They've returned, turned it into a fortress, and now threaten your shipping lanes. You gather your fleet. You send your best commanders. And as always, you expect victory. But Malta has other plans. The island of Malta rises like a defiant fist in the middle of your empire's watery heart. You should have crushed them years ago. After Rhodes, you let the Knights of St. John leave with honor. They regrouped in Malta, small, rocky, windswept, and now they harass your merchant lanes, raid your North African ports, even launch surprise attacks on Ottoman shipping. Enough. In 1565, you send a fleet, 200 ships, more than 30,000 troops, siege weapons, engineers, and the full weight of the Sultan's fury. You do not go in person. You are nearing 70 now, but your hand is in every decision. You choose the commander, Mustafa Pasha, experienced, cautious. You approve the artillery placements, the invasion timing, the supply chain. Malta, however, is not Rhodes. This is no half-abandoned fortress. The Knights of St. John have had decades to prepare. Under Grandmaster John de Valette, the island has been transformed into a maze of walls, redoubts, trenches, and cannon positions. And the Knights? They're outnumbered 10 to 1, but they are resolved to die where they stand. From the moment the first Ottoman troops land, the ground erupts. The siege of Fort St. Elmo is your opening move. Your engineers bombard it day and night. Cannonballs crash into limestone. Janissaries storm the walls again and again. You expect it to fall in a week. It takes a month. By the time St. Elmo is reduced to rubble, nearly 1,500 Ottoman soldiers have died. The fort is finally taken, but only after every knight inside fights to the death. De Valette watches from across the bay and orders no rescue. He lets them die so the rest of the island may live. Your commanders are shocked. Your men grow tired. The heat is unbearable. Flies swarm the dead. Water is scarce. Disease begins to fester in the ranks. Still, the siege presses on. You turn to Fort St. Angelo and Fort St. Michael, both positioned defensively across the harbor. Your engineers again dig trenches, position cannon, prepare mines under the walls. The defenders, outgunned and exhausted, refuse to surrender. What you don't expect, what no one expects, is the arrival of reinforcements. A Spanish-led relief force, small but determined, lands on the far side of the island. Your army, already fraying from months of siege, is stretched too thin. You win skirmishes, yes, but morale begins to splinter. And then the rain comes. October. Torrential rain soaks powder and rots provisions. Mud sucks down carts. Horses die. Even your seasoned veterans begin to whisper, "This place is cursed." Your commanders, reluctantly, order the retreat. The siege of Malta has cost you tens of thousands of lives and a precious slice of reputation. You don't say it aloud, but you feel it. Malta has become your first great failure. Still, you learn. You adjust your naval strategy. You focus on better logistics, smaller, faster squadrons. And you never forget the name de Valette, a man who stared down your empire and didn't blink. But if Malta is your physical defeat, the next blow is personal. Roxolana dies. She passes in 1558, just 7 years before Malta, and everything in the palace dims. The woman who stood by you through wars, succession plots, reform, and revolution is gone. You bury her in the mosque complex you built for her, the Haseki Hurrem Sultan Mosque, and you visit her tomb, often, quietly, with poems in your coat. You feel the weight of her absence in ways you can't speak, and in her absence, the court becomes colder. Her son Selim, now your heir, lacks your fire. He drinks more than he governs. He avoids campaigns. He's not weak, but he's not you. You see it. And so you begin the final act of your legacy. Securing what cannot be undone. You meet more often with Mimar Sinan, your court architect. Together, you finalize the Suleymaniye Mosque. Its dome immense, its silence divine. You order libraries filled, bridges built, caravanserais maintained. You double down on justice, personally reviewing cases brought to the palace, even from the poorest peasants. You summon ambassadors more frequently. You write to the Mughal emperor in India, exchanging gifts and ideas. You approve new court histories, ones that will preserve your reign not as a tale of conquest, but of civilization. And most significantly, you leave order, not just power. Succession, bureaucracy, taxes, military. Every moving part is now clear, formal, logical. You've seen what civil war did to other empires. You've sacrificed to prevent it. Even when it meant killing your son. Even when it meant enduring Malta. Even when it meant ruling alone, without Roxolana. You sit in the garden one evening, an old man in fine robes, watching the sun dip below the Sea of Marmara. The birds are quiet. Your court waits inside. And for a moment, you realize something strange. You do not feel proud. You feel resolved, like a sculptor placing the final chisel. You have ruled for nearly 5 decades. You have reshaped 2 continents. You have outlasted kings, popes, traitors, and time itself. And yet, the road is not over, because you hear whispers in the West again, in Hungary. And once more, against your doctor's orders, you ride to war. You ride again. The world tells you to rest. The physicians say your body is too frail, your joints too stiff, your lungs too shallow. But your eyes, they still burn with the fire of a boy who once dreamed of more than just a throne. And now that fire leads you to Hungary. Again. It's 1566, and Europe has not forgotten you. The Habsburgs never do. In your absence from active campaigning, they've nudged at your borders, stirred rebellion in Transylvania, and above all, given safe harbor to a name that cannot be ignored, Count Miklos Zrinyi, a Croatian noble, fierce, defiant, proud. He rules from Sigitvar, a fortress at the southern edge of Hungary. He's raided Ottoman supply lines, burned bridges, killed your messengers, and claimed to anyone who'd listen that Suleiman would never come this far again. He was wrong. Your caravan stretches for miles. Thousands of soldiers, horses, siege cannons, cooks, scribes, janissaries. Not as many as before, but still enough to make the ground tremble. And you, at 71, ride among them. The journey is long and slow. Summer's heat presses on the plains like a thick, wet cloth. The Danube reflects the sun like molten glass. You pause often, not out of weakness, but out of discipline. You know every step now matters more than it ever did. When you finally arrive outside Sigitvar, the fortress squats on a peninsula between marshes and lakes. Stone walls, narrow bridges, artillery placements. The defenders number fewer than 3,000. You bring 100,000. But this is no ordinary siege. Zrinyi refuses to surrender. His men are seasoned, disciplined, burning with fanaticism. And the fortress? It's cleverly divided into outer, inner, and central citadels. Taking one doesn't win the war, so your artillery roars. The first days of bombardment crack the outer walls. Your janissaries surge forward, only to meet mines, traps, and a storm of fire from defenders who fight like men possessed. You take the outer city after a week, but the real fighting hasn't even begun. You grow tired. Night sweats return. Your physicians beg you to remain in your tent. You do, but only to issue orders, review maps, approve promotions, compose verses to the divine. You know this may be your last campaign, and it must be finished. Meanwhile, Zrinyi launches night raids. His men swim across the river, torch Ottoman ships, cut the throats of sentries. They scream your name in defiance. You do not respond. You keep pressing. Slowly, surely, your forces take the second wall. Flames rise. The defenders fall back into the central citadel, cornered now, but unbroken. And then, your body gives way. On the night of September 5th, 1566, under the canvas of your imperial tent, with the scent of gunpowder in the air and the distant hum of battle beyond the marshes, Suleiman the Magnificent dies. Not in bed, not in a bath of roses, but in campaign armor, on the very frontier where your journey once began. Your closest advisors panic, but they hide your death. For days, no one knows. Your inner circle wraps your body in linen, seals the tent, and issues orders in your name. The troops still think you live. The siege continues under your unseen hand. And just before dawn on September 7th, as the Ottoman cannon tears down the final wall, as smoke covers the marshes and horns blare across the plain, Miklos Zrinyi emerges from the flames, in full armor, sword drawn, and charges into your army. A final act of defiance. He is cut down. His men die around him. And Sigitvar falls. But so does something else. Your empire trembles, not because it has lost its sultan, but because it realizes it must now continue without him. News of your death is revealed only after the siege ends. Your troops weep, your court braces. Your son, Selim, is quickly confirmed as successor. And for all your doubts, he steps into power with enough control to keep the machine running, for now. Your body is embalmed. Your heart and internal organs buried at Sigitvar under a small domed shrine. Your soul, the world says, rests with God. But your legend, it explodes. The man who ruled for 46 years, who wrote love poems in Persian and Turkish, who reformed laws and redrew continents, who ruled 2 seas and 3 faiths, he is gone. But he is everywhere. You are remembered in Europe not as a tyrant, but as a monarch of genius. In the Islamic world, you are caliph, protector of the holy cities, builder of mosques and fountains. To your people, you are kanuni, the lawgiver. But in this last campaign, in the fire and mud of a forgotten Hungarian fortress, you became something else. You became immortal. You are gone, but the world you forged does not collapse. The Ottoman Empire, vast and intricately built, continues to function as if you had merely gone to sleep. That's how well you designed it. Your son, Selim II, now sits on the throne. They call him Selim the Sot for his love of wine and poetry and the pleasures of palace life. He does not ride at the head of armies. He delegates. He avoids battle. He is not you. And yet, your system, your laws, your bureaucracy, your balance of fear and justice, It holds for now. Selim inherits not just the throne, but an empire that functions like a well-oiled machine. The governors continue to collect taxes and send reports. The janissaries march on schedule. The viziers meet daily. The navy patrols the sea routes. Everything still orbits around a single powerful center, Istanbul. And in Istanbul, something begins to shift. Under Selim, Roxolana's legacy intensifies. Her influence didn't end with her death. Her sons and daughters, her son-in-law Rustam Pasha, and their descendants now form the core of the imperial family-state network. The harem, once a symbol of private pleasure, is now a command post. Royal women negotiate marriages, appoint governors, and even select military commanders behind lattice screens. This era will later be known as the Sultanate of Women, and it only exists because you made it possible. You were the first sultan to marry, the first to legitimize your consort, the first to allow her access to power. Now, the very idea of an Ottoman queen is normalized, a continuation of your most personal and most radical political act. Meanwhile, Selim has his eye on Cyprus. The island is ruled by Venice, but it's ripe for conquest. Strategic, rich, and located in the eastern Mediterranean like a dagger in your empire's side. So, in 1570, Selim sends the fleet. The siege of Nicosia is swift. Ottoman forces overwhelm the Venetian defenders, despite stiff resistance. The next year, Famagusta, the last Venetian stronghold on the island, falls too, after a siege marked by horror, endurance, and betrayal. Cyprus becomes an Ottoman province. It's Selim's only real military achievement, but it's significant. It shows that even under a weaker sultan, your empire is still powerful. But Europe doesn't sit still. In 1571s, the Catholic powers, horrified by Cyprus and eager to reclaim control of the seas, formed the Holy League, a grand alliance of Spain, Venice, the Papal States, and others, united under Don John of Austria. They meet your navy at the Battle of Lepanto. And here, for the first time in a generation, Ottoman sea power suffers a catastrophic defeat. More than 200 Ottoman ships are destroyed or captured. Tens of thousands of men are killed or taken prisoner. The Christian world celebrates as if a demon has been slain. But what they don't realize is that while the battle is a tactical victory, it is not a strategic one. Within a year, your shipyards in Galata and Constantinople have replaced the entire fleet. The Ottoman navy is back, just as large, just as armed, just as terrifying. Because your system wasn't built for moments. It was built for momentum. And momentum remains. Your empire continues to expand in North Africa, solidifying rule in Algeria, Tripoli, and even threatening the Moroccan interior. In Anatolia, public works flourish, roads are maintained, mosques are completed, trade continues to flow. But something is different now. The machine turns, but the spirit has changed. Without your hand at the helm, ambition softens into complacency. Viziers bicker more, sultans drink more. The elite fight harder for favor than for ideas. Your carefully balanced meritocracy begins to erode just a little as posts start going to favorites instead of the most capable. It's not a collapse, but it's a slippage. And it's the kind of slippage that, in a century or two, will become a slide. But even now, even as cracks begin to form, the world looks to the east and still sees you. In Vienna, monarchs remember your siege and still plan their defenses accordingly. In Marrakech, sultans mimic your court rituals and fashion their robes to match Ottoman tailors. In Delhi, Mughal emperors borrow your architecture, your calligraphy, your legal terms. And in Istanbul, where the Bosphorus shimmers beneath crescent moons, your mosque, the Suleymaniye, still towers over the city. Scholars read your laws. Pilgrims pray beside your tomb. Children memorize your poems. The shadow of Suleiman has not vanished. It has become a standard, a comparison, a myth. And yet, for all your glory, you left one truth in your wake. Even the most magnificent empire cannot survive on structures alone. It needs the soul of a leader. And though your empire lives on, the soul is gone. You are no longer here, but your name remains etched in marble, in law books, in the rustling of palace curtains, and in the silence that fills a ruler's empty throne. The generations after you don't forget at first. Selim Tsiku, your son, rules for only 8 years. He dies after a fall in his bathhouse, and with him passes the last echo of your voice in the court. After Selim, your grandson Murad III takes the throne. then Mehmed III, then Ahmed Ast, and on and on. Some are wise, some are cruel, a few are barely awake behind their bejeweled turbans, but none of them are you. Still, your system, rigid, massive, thorough, keeps breathing. The Janissaries march, the Imperial Council meets, taxes are collected from Algeria to Baghdad, and yet, cracks widen. Your Devshirm system, once the envy of every state, a merit-based machine that turned Christian boys into statesmen, becomes corrupted. Bribes flow. The posts of power, once earned through valor or study, now go to the highest bidder or the loudest flatterer. Your navy, once the terror of Christendom, becomes slower, heavier, bloated with ceremonial officers who have never seen a storm. The Mediterranean turns cold. The Atlantic, far to the west, is now where history moves fastest. And the Ottomans? They never learned to sail that far. And your legal code, your beloved Kanun, begins to be misused. Instead of a sword of justice, it becomes a shield for inefficiency. Judges delay verdicts. Officials twist law to squeeze more from farmers. Not everywhere, not all at once, but the rot begins slowly, like moisture behind painted walls. And then there are the Janissaries. Once you're elite, disciplined, loyal, raised from youth in the art of war, they evolve into a political bloc, a union, a voting class. They resist reform. They riot when denied raises. They dethrone sultans who challenge their perks. They no longer fight for the state. They fight within it. But here's the strangest part. Despite the corruption, the laziness, the whispers of rebellion, the empire still holds together. For a time, even into the 1600s, 1700s, and beyond. Why? Because your blueprint was too good. You didn't just build a throne. You built a system of continuity, a cultural center of gravity that kept provinces aligned even when rulers faltered. You planted mosques, madrasas, bazaars, and courts, physical structures that kept communities tethered to the Ottoman world even when Istanbul slept. Muslim poets still quote your verses. In Cairo, scholars still teach law using your codes. In Mecca and Medina, your foundations and charitable endowments feed the poor and light the lamps of prayer. And across the Balkans, peasants still speak of Kanuni, the just one, the lawgiver, the one who wrote poetry and raised an empire in the same hand. You live on not just in buildings, but in expectation, the memory that a ruler can be both powerful and fair, ambitious and wise, human and magnificent. But history has no patience for statues. As the centuries pass, Europe modernizes. The printing press, the stock exchange, the age of sail, and soon the Industrial Revolution. These forces reshape the globe. And the Ottomans, despite their power, fall behind. Your descendants argue about reforms. Some want to imitate Europe. Others want to return to your time, a golden age that none can recreate. And this longing? It becomes the great irony of your legacy. You were a modernizer, constantly adapting, fusing Islamic tradition with secular reform. But those who invoke your name often do so to preserve the past, not evolve it. You become a myth, and myths are harder to update than men. In the late 1600s, the empire starts losing wars more often than it wins. Territory shrinks, corruption deepens, provinces revolt, trade routes bypass Ottoman cities. The world turns faster, and your empire moves like it's underwater. Still, you are remembered, even in defeat, even as the West carves up your frontiers, even as sultans grow more ceremonial and generals grow more timid. Your memory is still summoned like an incantation. What would Suleiman have done? And that question? It holds the empire together long after logic says it should have fallen. Your ghost commands more loyalty than some of your successors. And even when, in 1924, the Ottoman Caliphate is officially abolished by the Turkish Republic, even when the empire is gone, your shadow remains. Because the nations that rise from its ashes, Turkey, Iraq, Syria, the Balkans, North Africa, all carry your imprint in architecture, language, law, and imagination. Your story doesn't end with your death. It expands. It becomes the standard by which all others are measured. Not because you were perfect, but because you cared more than anyone else ever did. About law, about poetry, about justice, about your people, about the very idea of empire. You didn't just rule an age, you defined it. Time blurs you into legend. Centuries pass, and your name becomes shorthand for glory, for a lost age when sultans wrote poems, rode at the head of their armies, and passed judgment under cypress trees instead of behind velvet drapes. But now, in the modern age, Who are you? You are Suleiman the Magnificent to the West, Suleiman el-Kanuni to your people. One name, two identities. To Europeans, you were the wise and terrifying emperor at the gates of Vienna. To Muslims, you were the lawgiver, the one who took a chaotic inheritance and turned it into order. Even Napoleon, centuries later, would look east and ask, why can't we govern like them? Even Protestant reformers fighting Catholic Spain looked to you as an ally, as a check against Habsburg tyranny. You were to the world a paradox, an Islamic ruler who outshone Christian kings in culture, reform, and vision. Your story appears in paintings, plays, films, TV series, and each time the image changes. Sometimes they paint you as a lover, torn between statecraft and a mysterious woman from Ruthenia. Sometimes you are a military genius, bathed in gold light. Sometimes you are a cold executioner in the shadow of your son's death. But the truth? The truth lies somewhere in between. You were a man, a young prince who thought the crown was a cage, a grieving father who sacrificed his own blood to preserve the state, a philosopher in armor, quoting the Quran by torchlight and scribbling Persian love lines between battle reports. You were not just king of an empire, you were king of contradictions. You made peace with Francis I of France, then marched on him anyway when the maps demanded it. You broke the Janissaries when they mutinied, but also granted them higher pay and more rights than any ruler before you. You crushed rebellions with fire and then built mosques in the ashes. You drowned Europe in war and yet inspired its renaissance in statecraft. But the greatest thing you ever conquered? Time. Because even now, centuries after you died in a military tent outside a Hungarian fortress, you're still quoted in legal debates. You're still analyzed in classrooms from Istanbul to Oxford. Your name still commands respect, even in places where your flag hasn't flown for generations. You left behind more than borders. You left behind blueprints. Your mosques taught how architecture can reflect divine harmony. Your laws showed how justice could be standardized across races, languages, and provinces. Your administration proved that a government could survive its creator if built carefully enough. And your story? It taught rulers across the globe, from Mughal emperors to Enlightenment kings to modern presidents, that power alone is not enough. It must be shaped. It must be bound by law. It must, when possible, write poetry. In Turkey today, school children visit your tomb. Some don't know the details of your campaigns or the legal codes you composed, but they feel your presence. In domes, in stones, in the balance of their city skyline. And those who do study you, historians, scholars, even skeptics, may debate your methods, your costs, your mistakes, but none question your impact, because the man who began his reign chasing shadows across the Danube ended it binding the world in light and law. You didn't just rule the Ottoman Empire. You were the Ottoman Empire, the rhythm of its armies, the pen of its reforms, the soul of its vision. And even as the empire later unraveled, even as its legacy was carved into pieces by history's sharper knives, your story survived as a mirror, as a warning, as a memory, and as a challenge to all who ever dream of power with purpose. You close your eyes in that tent near Shigitvar, never to open them again, but the story does not fade. In fact, it grows louder with each passing generation. For centuries, the world will keep asking the same question. How did he do it? How did the child of a provincial governor become the master of an empire spanning 2 continents? How did a man obsessed with poetry and divine order manage to outfight, outthink, and outgovern nearly every monarch of his age? The answer lies not in your armies, not in your palaces, not even in your laws. It lies in your sense of balance. You lived in the tension between power and restraint, between conquest and construction, between the sword and the pen. And somehow, you never snapped. You could reduce fortresses to ash and then rebuild them as gardens. You could execute your closest advisors and still be remembered as just. You could mourn your son and still march on the next morning with the empire at your back. Because you were never just chasing victory, you were chasing civilization. And now, centuries later, your empire is gone, but your vision continues to echo. Look to the skyline of Istanbul. The Süleymaniye Mosque still crowns the hill, silent and sublime, its dome floating above the Bosphorus like a pearl on glass. Tourists snap photos, imams lead prayers, and somewhere, Perhaps in the stillness between call to prayer and closing doors, someone whispers your name. In the corridors of former palaces, your firmans, imperial decrees still survive, brittle and yellowed, but legible. Scholars hunch over them, decoding your intentions, marveling at your exactness. In law schools, even today, students study your kanun. They see how you harmonized Sharia with the needs of a modern state, how you created predictability in a world of chaos. And in the West, where once your name conjured fear and crusade, your image has shifted. Historians now call you the Renaissance Sultan, the one who read Machiavelli and the Quran, the one who could negotiate with kings by day and write Persian love poems by night, the one who saw leadership not as domination, but as stewardship. And beyond the politics, beyond the battles and palatial intrigues, lies the simplest reason your legacy endures. You cared. You cared enough to read everything, to learn from everyone, to correct injustice even when it came from your own viziers. You weren't perfect, but you were present. And in a world of distant kings and invisible emperors, you stood at the center of it all. Visible, accountable, real. You were human. That's what makes you immortal, because greatness is not just about triumph, it's about how you carry the burden of power. And you, Suleiman, carried it like a poet with the patience of a builder and the vision of a prophet. Even now, your empire lives on, not in borders, but in blueprints, not in armies, but in ideas. And that outlasts marble, that outlasts fire, that outlasts time. You wrote yourself into history, not just with ink, not just with steel, but with soul. So that was the story of Suleiman the Magnificent, the sultan who ruled with a sword in one hand and a scroll in the other, the man who transformed a dynasty into a civilization, and whose reach shaped everything from European borders to Islamic law, from Mediterranean trade routes to the very skyline of Istanbul. Through poetry, war, reform, and heartbreak, Suleiman showed that true leadership is more than just conquest. It's about building systems that last. It's about sacrificing comfort for legacy. It's about asking every day, what kind of world am I leaving behind? And yes, Suleiman made hard choices. He executed his own son. He watched allies betray him. He faced enemies from every direction. But through it all, he kept building, kept writing, kept leading. That's why his story isn't just history. It's a map for anyone who wants to understand how power can be used not just to dominate, but to shape. So if you enjoyed this journey, if it gave you something to think about, maybe about the weight of leadership or the meaning of legacy, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know where you're watching from and what historical figure you'd like to explore next. And until next time, remember, the greatest empires don't just build walls, they build ideas. End of script. Enjoy listening, and subscribe to the channel for the next video.